And one of the most important facets of that world, surely, was that it gave you a great deal of time to spend with your son, Sean.
Yeah, because between Yoko and I cannot do figures and numbers. I'm not good at business. And somebody had to take the care of business, whether it was Beetle apples or surviving inflation or whatever you call it. And there's no way I can do it. I don't have that talent. So she had to do it. She has the talent to do it. So I had to contribute something, not just sit around either talking about the former greatness of the Beatles or the fact that, well, I'm not writing songs, so what am I supposed to do? So I had the early relationship with Sean because she would go to the office, even though the office was only downstairs in the same building. She was still not there. And so Sean and I would spend this time together. And it was fantastic because, as I said in some interview, with Julian, my first child, I was just toured the world. I would come home and there'd be a 12-year-old boy there who I had no relationship whatsoever. Now he's 17. I'm getting a relationship now because I can talk and about music and whatever he's into and girlfriends and that kind of stuff. It was a strange child in the house. I'd come back from Australia and he'd be a different size. I wouldn't even recognize the way he looked half the time. Yeah. I didn't want that to be like that with Sean. And the timing was just right for me to do all that as well. And it's great, the jokes. They did a thing on Saturday Night Live. They had me in an apron and Yoko was with a tie and all that. And they did a real good skit on us, and we were hysterical. I mean, it was just very, very funny. All the time I kept getting on saying, oh, look, the oven's burning, and that was the skit of me. But I don't mind Mickey taking it all, because to me, I approached it intellectually at first as a kind of Zen discipline. Make the bread, conquer the rice. Conquer that dependence on woman. Even if I'm alone, I can now cook.
See, enough to get by. I mean, most men probably resent the fact that they have to depend on women on those things.
They like their independence. They like to be able to go in the kitchen and cook.
When you think about it, at school, I wish they taught us practical things. I wish I could type so as I could write quickly, right, which I've self-taught myself, but it's still not fast enough, right? I wish I'd been taught to cook so as I could look after myself when my auntie was not there or something. I know you were there most of the time, but sometimes you weren't there. But whenever, when I was a bit older and coming in at odd times or getting in a flat when I was at college, suddenly there's this tin of beans, or living on fish and chips. If you just taught to cook, type, and a few practical things, and to drive, instead of all this garbage about the spinning jenny, who gives a damn about the spinning jenny,
Now, I want to ask you about writing. I mean, writing 10 songs in a week, as I believe you did, we mentioned it earlier, for the Walls and Bridges album. That seems to me to be an awful lot of pressure. How exactly do you go about writing, John, these days, or both of you, in fact, as a combination? Which of those two is the more important?
Looking back at it, whenever I comment about writing, I always seem to have been suffering, whether it was writing Day in the Life or whatever. It's some kind of suffering, so I always seem to have an intense time writing and thinking this is the end and nothing's coming and this is dumb and this is no good and all that business. So not writing for the 5 years, which I didn't pick up a guitar or anything, and not trying to write, not making an attempt to write or anything like that. So what you said about Walls and Bridges applies to Double Fantasy. I was in Bermuda and Yoko was in New York doing some business. I was in Bermuda with Sean and the nanny and that kind of stuff. And then when we made a tentative decision to make a record, I didn't have any material. Then suddenly it all came to me. All the songs that are on Double Fantasy all came within a period of 3 weeks in Bermuda after 5 years of nothing. Not trying, but nothing coming anyway. No inspiration, no anything. Then suddenly, boom, 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 boom.
See, he's a very fast writer because it's an inspiration. It just comes through him. So it's just a matter of writing it down almost. When we did Double Fantasy, I was in New York and he was in Bermuda. We would sort of communicate on the phone. I would say, well, what about this? And then he would call me maybe 4 hours later and say, what about this? We'd be singing to each other. And that was the dialogue. It was very strange. And we went through sort of like a paradoxical feeling of, well, half resisting. Well, I don't want to hear a song now. I'm very tired. But, well, I mean, I've heard yours. Oh, right. Well, let's hear it then. That sort of thing. I went through that. And then we were going to go to the studio. And because of that, I felt we're both big-headed people. And so maybe we're going to fight like crazy over remix or this and that, because we both have very definite ideas. And I'm sure that John felt that way, too. John must have felt, well, can we really work together? But somehow we worked so well. And we were all prepared to maybe have a difficult time, but Don't you think
Yeah,
so?
it was the easiest session I've
strange.
ever done, I think.
5 years is an awful long time. What sort of mental discipline did it involve resisting picking up a guitar? I mean,
Well, it wasn't a matter of resisting. The first half a year or a year, I had this sort of feeling in the back of my mind that I ought to. And I'd go through periods of panic because I was not in the NME or the Billboard or being seen at Studio 54 with Mick and Bianca. I mean, I didn't exist anymore. I got a little fear of that would come, like a paranoia, and then it would go away because I'd be involved with the baby or involved with whatever other business that we were involved with. But that only lasted about 9 months, and then there was suddenly like it just went away. And I realized there was a life after death, you know, I mean, there was a life without it.
did you enjoy that
It
realization?
was great. It was like, oh my God, and I would sit around thinking, what does this remind me of? What does this remind me of? I thought, this reminds me of being 15. I didn't have to write songs at 15. I wrote it if I wanted to, or I played rock and roll if I wanted to. I didn't have to do it. I didn't have some imaginary standard set up by me or some group of critics or whatever.
In other words, back to the days before the pressure started.
So I sort of got back to that, and then that's when I suddenly could do it again with ease. The most enjoyable thing for me, apart from putting them on the tape when you first put them, is the inspirational in the spirit. Because when the songs really come and you're not sitting down like a craftsman writing, I can do that. You know, you want a song about bananas for a movie, I could do that. Okay, you know, I'm quite capable of turning it out like that. I wouldn't enjoy it so much maybe, but I could do it on that level. But my joy is when you're like possessed, like a medium. I mean, I'll be sitting around and it'll come in the middle of the night or the time when you don't want to do it. You know, that's the exciting part. So I'm lying around, and then this thing comes as a whole piece, you know, words and music. And I'm thinking, can I say I wrote it? I don't know who the hell wrote it. I'm just sitting here and this whole damn song comes out. So you're like driven, and you find yourself over on a piano or a guitar and you put it down because it's been given to you or whatever it is that you tune into.
How did you find him during this period, Yoko?
Yes, he was doing that, and of course I was doing that too. We're very similar that way, you know. So when it comes, it comes.
But were you relieved that he had finally decided
There
to
was
lay
no-
down the guitar and rest?
We weren't suffering or we weren't feeling worried when we were just relaxing. So there was no strong feeling of relief. In fact, the nicest thing about Double Fantasy was that while we were making, we were fully aware that we didn't have to make it. We were making it, we were enjoying it. But we could always go back to the other life, because the thing was that we now know that we have the other life as well. It's not like we have to always be in the front, you know.
Yeah, so that was the joy of it. It's the same joy now.
Very
Had it
relaxing.
not been accepted, and by now it has been well accepted in England and America and various parts north and south of the world. But if it hadn't, we would have been hurt, but then one wouldn't have wanted to kill oneself or go back to the bottle because somebody didn't like your record or whatever. So knowing that gives you a kind of freedom that you have when you're younger, when you don't have a past to live up to. And that's the joy of it. I have a past, but I don't have to live up to it.